Like and subscribe for more Army football analysis. Shop our store today. Go Army! Beat Navy!
Welcome to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. The Army Football Show is an insider's guide for cadets, old grads, and college football fans to follow the Army team throughout their season as they seek to beat Navy and claim the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. Ask for Football is brought to you by our sponsor, Jocelyn Bradley Real Estate. Whether you're buying, selling, or just exploring your options, Jocelyn Bradley is the expert you can trust to navigate the real estate market with ease. Visit jocelynbradley.com to learn more. And let's get started at the Ask for Football Army Football Show. Welcome back. You can tell it's the preseason because we're still having some technical difficulties. However, we are on. Welcome to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. Actually, this is the Ask for Lifestyle, so doggone it, we are going to make fetch happen. So we're going to keep doing this until either Danno gives in or we find something else to do in the off season. But welcome back. It's Lifestyle Show number 2. We talked about AI on the previous one. Hey, you should check it out. I think it was pretty cool, and it was very pointed and accurate for like the sign of the times. But this time we're going to talk about writing a book and telling your story. But welcome. This is our second lifestyle show. Hopefully it lasts. It's up to Danno. I'm your host, Rob, in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
I'm not the dictator of Ask for Football. Listen, we're in training camp here, Rob. It's all good.
Yeah, true. But sets and reps, right? Sets and reps. Dan's calling to you out of coastal Connecticut, and joining us from the great state of Maryland is we've got Joe Troutman. He's the author of the book Gods of War, The Legend of Blackhawk Company, 123 Infantry. We're not talking about football today, so if you were expecting that, sorry, but we are going to get into it. We will mention, though, before we get started, that Army football kickoff is coming soon. As we speak, the team is getting ready. There's actually guys at camp at Mikey Stadium. Just got a text from Terry saying that the players are getting out to the field. They had an upperclassmen rehearsal beforehand, and now the plebes are getting out there. We're about 40 days away before Army kicks off against Bryant at Mikey Stadium. And if you're hearing this later, we're even closer. But today's purpose is to find your story, write your book, and figure out how certain memories become books. But before we get started, let's pay some bills. If you listened to this show before, or you know that we have a sponsor here, it's Jocelyn Bradley. She's a realtor. If you're PCSing to the Fort Bragg area, we have the realtor for you. Jocelyn is a veteran who spent her Army career in logistics. She discovered a passion for making a difference in people's lives. She's committed to helping her clients find their dream home when they're in the market, and she provides exceptional service when she's working for you. Jocelyn has decided to support Ask for Football again this season, which is great. She's been a great sponsor, and she's a great teammate. And she's the right person to get you into the home of your dreams. She also has an extended network of veteran realtors who can help support you if you're moving anywhere else in the country. So if you are in the market for a home, Jocelyn should be your first call. Even if you're not moving to Fort Bragg, Jocelyn can help you. She can make intros to people in your next region of PCS and can help you figure out where you're going to land. But, and it won't cost you anything. There's a lot of services that will help you relocate, but some of them charge stuff, and Jocelyn will not. Other than that, let's roll into the discussion. One of the things that we do here at Ask for Football is we try and do our best to tell stories to the Army fandom to make it as immersive as possible to the Army football experience. But, whether it's a post-game write-up or one of Omar's historical breakdown, we try to bring you information that helps you move from the stands onto the field and immerse you into the experience. But today, we are joined by two published authors and fans of Ask for Football and college football in general. So we've got Joe Troutman and Danno Ikebesa, the man who needs no introduction. But Joe, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, where you serve, and what made you write the book.
I was born in Erie, Pennsylvania, but I grew up in Ocean City, Maryland on the beach. Joined the Army in 96, went to Korea, went to Fort Hood, went to the Stryker Brigade, BCO 123 Infantry, was an instructor at Fort Sill, went back to Fort Hood, went back to the Stryker Brigade, and then I retired in 2014. My last assignment was with 520 Infantry up in the Stryker Brigade. The reason I wrote the book, I always live with these great memories of all of these amazing people that I served alongside of. People that shaped my life going forward, not just militarily, but like in general, like made me who I was. These are examples of people that I wanted to be as I grew up in the military. And about 10 years ago, I was like, man, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to write this story down because the story itself is amazing. I'm not a writer. I never thought of myself as a writer, but the story itself is phenomenal. And having conversations with you and having conversations with Swifty and people like Paul Schmitz and just people who are there on the ground. I mean, we used to joke all the time about, hey, they're going to make a movie about this someday, because we kind of felt like we were a little bit different. And then I wanted to do justice to the story. So I started just kind of writing things down. And, I've always been a great storyteller, but I never thought of myself as a writer. So that's kind of how the book kind of evolved.
Yeah. Well, and again, we'll get into a little bit more details. Dan, tell us about your journey, because like everybody knows you as like the editor of As for Football, and you've written some things that we've seen like internally, but like to the wider audience or somebody that might be catching this as they're paging through, like tell us a little bit about your background and what made you decide to, put pen to paper and capture a bit of history.
I wrote all this shit down, and now I don't even want to talk about half of it, but I'm obviously a member of the West Point class of 1995. I majored in European history, so I'm kind of the opposite of Joe. I grew up as a writer, but now I work as an electrical engineer, and I have for 25 years. It's like a super technical job where I do math all the time. So As for Football and just writing in general is kind of how I exercise the other part of my brain. I write for the same reason that I swim. Of course, I was a swimmer at West Point and growing up. I've written a bunch of books, not just this one. I wrote a comic book, Bronx Angel. That's like my anti-war book way back in the day. I wrote a couple of books about my kids' Dungeons and Dragons characters. These are not like serious books, but the kids did like them, and they're out there if you're interested. And then I was in the middle of working on that third book about my kids' characters, and I got stuck. And my sister-in-law had always said, "Hey, I like it when you write about yourself, and you write about your dad and your relationship with your family. I'd like to see you do more of that." So I just started writing, and man, 80,000 words poured out in 3 months. And writing is how I figure shit out. Like As for Football was born kind of because I was in the stands, didn't know exactly what I was watching, started writing about it to figure it out. And like, here we are almost 10 years later. So that's it. Writing the story and deciding to put it out there publicly are different things. So we can talk about that more if you want to.
Yeah, for sure. So, what was it, the inspiration? I know that you guys, both have different perspectives, and, Joe, I know you said you wanted to capture a story, of all these people here. Like, nice. Kevin McFadden's in the chat. Thanks for that, Kevin.
Oh, shit.
Talk crap about no, I do not have beard dye. I'm just not aging. I am a vampire. But the reality of it is both of these books are rooted in the history of your lives, and it's from a perspective in a short period of time. And Joe, just what are your thoughts? Like, what was your inspiration other than just like, hey, I got to tell this story? Because to write something, we're all great at telling stories. Like, we can BS with the best of them, sit around the campfire and tell tales and spin yarns. But the reality of it is the amount of effort. It's a conscious decision to write things. So, what really made you do that?
Well, I mean, I had always kind of wrote these little Facebook posts now and then. And then one of them you actually ended up using on your podcast a couple of years ago. And actually, like, hearing you read it made me think, hey, maybe there's a story there. And like I said, we had a lot of conversations, and we were talking about how there's not a lot of documented history. So I wanted to give the guys, I mean, it never started out as like this giant book. It was going to be something that we could give to the guys to say, hey, this is what we went through, something you can be proud of, something you can maybe pass along to your kids, your grandkids, something that just gives life to what you did so you can see it in print. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I never was a writer. I never sat down to write a book technically. I really just wanted to document the deployment, and it turned into so much more.
Now, Danno, you had a similar experience too, because like yours started off as a blog, right? At least your memoir did.
Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, at the time, it was just like crazy scribblings in my notebook. But so my parents had both just died, And my dad died way back in 2007 when, you know, my one daughter was 2 and the other daughter was like 6 months old. You know, my youngest daughter legitimately has no memories of my father whatsoever. My older daughter, I think her first memory ever is being at his funeral. So
wow.
if they were ever going to get to know like my parents, you know, my mom died in 2011. I started working on this probably 2013. So if my kids were ever going to get to know anything about my family or about their own history, like I had to put it down on paper. Nobody else was going to do it. Like those stories were just going to be forgotten. So it's not different at all. Like if you don't tell your story, man, nobody's going to tell it for you. And Joe, I give you all the credit in the world, especially for finishing, you know, just for, you know, that's a badass thing to do.
Yeah, you know, and it's one of the things that we talk about now with the age of social media and everything else that's out there. You can document your whole life with a cell phone, right? But it doesn't mean that it's going to be coherent or actually make any sense, right? So like if you go through your phone, like you will know all these events and places and spaces that you've been, but like if you were to hand your phone off to somebody else and they go through your, you know, your photo gallery, they're going to be like, what is all this, right? Like I can't tell what's going on, just see a bunch of pictures, like there's no context. And so as a author, I think you guys really were able to shape the context around, you know, your relative situations and put them in print. And that was, you know, particularly important. You know, one of the things that always kind of happens is, like Dan said, you know, there's a point when the memory goes away, right? So if you don't write it down, you know, who's going to capture that history? And I know it, and you know, one of the advantages that Joe had, I know, was the fact that there's a lot of memory in all the reports and orders and everything else that we had. But Dan, as far as your process was concerned, how did you pull that together to like really shape and tell the story about, you know, your parents? Because like it's from your point of view, but I think you were probably trying to expand it to teach, you know, to spread that message to your family.
Okay. So there's a couple of different things in there. My book is very much an oral history, and there's actually a disclaimer on the first page that says most of this is true. You know, this is basically the best of my memory. And I didn't do any research. Like I consciously decided not to try to dig into the history, but just to tell like the oral history of it. You know, if you imagine the ancient Greeks sitting around the campfire telling, you know, myths, those things evolve over time because they change in the telling. So the good thing about writing it down is at least it stops changing at that point, but it was definitely changing up to that. And in fact, a couple of people who are in the book or who knew me at the time of some of the stuff I was talking about have said, hey, I think you maybe misremembered this thing. And it's like, okay, you know, sure. But it doesn't change how I feel. And the whole point is, you know, talking about sort of why we do the things that we do. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then Joe, for you, like one of the things that I think that was probably the most challenging for you is making your book accessible to an audience that didn't serve. Right. So again, like telling a family story is one thing, you know, I can give you enough information where you can kind of peek inside the curtain and see what's going on inside the household. But like for you, how did you take like all this mountains of information that you had and convert it into something that allowed somebody to, you know, pick it up and read it and understand and say, oh yeah, like, yeah, I get this, you know?
Well, what I tried to do was make an emotional connection with the readers through common threads. So, I mean, yeah, we were Army guys deployed down range, getting shot at and getting in the gun battles. But at the end of the day, we're all human. We have families back at home. We have people that depend on us. We have ordinary things that happen to us. So I tried to find those things that tied the non-military audience in there, and they could say, okay, I can relate to this. I can relate to trying to have fun. I can relate to just trying to survive to the next day, and kind of just those ordinary things that kind of put the human aspect to. A lot of times when people watch movies and they read about soldiers, there's like this different connection that they're different than just real people. They're robots. And that was kind of what I tried to do, was put that human side to that emotional connection so the readers could stay connected.
Honestly, that's one of the main reasons that we like to do As for Football the way that we do it, to try to get into the stands and into the minds of the fans, is because, you know, people tend to put West Point on such a pedestal, but that doesn't really help anyone, right? I mean, great, you know, let's mythologize the academy, sure, but if you don't see the cadets as people, then it's a little too easy to dehumanize them, which is not what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Here's another comment. It says, I know Joe's book helped my dad and brother understand things that I went through because I don't talk about it. And I think that's one of the things too, is like, there are certain things that like are going to remain like your personal family history or with inside the construct of your family. And so, how do you write on those topics and protect the people in your stories without damaging them? Because I mean, like sometimes there's harsh truths that come out of it. Like there's a harsh reality of war, and I know Joe, like you've had some situations that you had to address, and Dan, like, what are your thoughts? Because I know that, not all upbringings are rosy, and there's going to be moments where, mom and dad didn't see eye to eye, or you saw something or did something that had an adverse result. And how do you put that in print, without burning it all down?
I just tried to talk about what happened, but to stay on topic. Like there's some stuff that I left out that happened to other people that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Just without getting any details, like high school age group swimming is a sport that is ripe for grooming behavior among unethical coaching.
Yeah.
And I saw that and pulled it out of a draft at a certain point, just because, I mean, it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't my story, and I didn't need to name names or embarrass people that were like bystanders catching strays.
Yeah.
But as far as like my family is concerned, I just wanted to talk about what happened. I mean, I don't like, my father retired as a Marine colonel. He won every award the Marines could give him except his star. And, he commanded a reconnaissance battalion. Like he did everything. And I don't need to mythologize him, because believe me, everybody and their brother liked to mythologize him when he was alive. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I also, I'm not going to pretend he wasn't somebody. He was somebody that he wasn't. Like so my father drank himself to death, right? I mean, the book is essentially, the end of the book is essentially learning to sort of move past that. And that's like the last arc of the story. And like, but we all know vets who didn't want to come home, just didn't want to do it. Like we all know that guy.
Yeah,
and
100%.
I'm sorry to say that guy was my dad.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate. And I can tell you that, like, my experience, my dad wasn't the greatest either. Maybe it's a generational thing, or it's potentially just, just the environment. Like,
I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't great. I'm not disparaging the man. I'm just saying, like, as a vet, he was the guy who didn't want to fucking do it. Didn't like civilians, didn't want to get to like them. Yeah. I mean, I know you guys know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And
like, absolutely.
And that's a tough thing to hang up to, like, and I encounter that a lot of, in this space, I'm military adjacent with contracting stuff that I do. And so I'm close enough to see the guys like, oh, that guy's going to suck when he gets out, and you can see it because there's always those guys that hang on to that one formative event while they're in uniform.
Absolutely.
And that becomes their entire identity for the rest of the time. Like if that was the case, man, if I literally stuck to, the worst day of my deployment as a company commander, I'm stuck in 2004.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's 20 years ago. And if I can't let that go, then I can't be any good for any other
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
Joe, what about you? Like, I know that you encountered somebody and I know who it is, but for the record, I want you to like put it out there because there are some people that kind of push back when you were writing the book, and telling the stories. Because
I had
like
one individual, so only one individual who refused to let me use his name for the book. So I had to change that name. So that would be Lieutenant Dan Smith in the book. But those events were real. It is funny because as much as that person doesn't want their name associated with the things that were done, everyone who was there knows exactly what happened and who that person is. So it doesn't really matter anyhow because it's all verified.
Yeah, it doesn't take anything away from the story, but it also shows you the type of person that you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey man,
absolutely.
if you're a second lieutenant in the Army, guess what? You're supposed to be a shithead. You're going to do dumb things. You're going to have an NCO that's going to grab you and be like, hey man, like, don't do that. It's dumb. Right? We know that. Like, that's part of the experience. And if you are not willing to acknowledge that you were a jacked up lieutenant, then you're probably not a very good officer, right? Like, we know that because like we all were screwed up at some point. Like, we can sit back and look at those days fondly and be like, whew, thank God I got past those days when I was all jacked up.
Well, and it's funny because like in the book, I talk about the first time we were going out on deployment, the night of December 8th, right before all of that stuff went down. I was lost in the assembly area trying to figure out where the heck I was supposed to go. I couldn't get my 50 cal to work. Like this, I was like, I'm getting fired tonight.
Yeah. And those are experiences that you're always going to be able to take with you. And it's very, very important to remember those things and like grow from them. And like, yeah, nobody wants to nobody wants to air their bad laundry intentionally, maybe. But for the most part, like you want to be able to have a legitimate interaction with, the people that are in the book, because like these are actually real people. They're not characters,
So let me just say, from a writing perspective, that if you're afraid to make yourself look human, you're writing a boring book that nobody wants to read. I mean, that's just the reality. Like we all screw up. Like that's just the reality. So you can make yourself sympathetic and people understand like, oh, this person had a bad day and he just has the courage to write about it. Like there is nothing wrong with that. That's actually the purpose.
And I think it helps too, because it shows that human side and it helps you to connect, because it's hard. I don't know about you, Danno, but like when you're writing a book, it's hard to not say the things that you did and not make you the main character. You know what I mean? This book isn't about me. This is what I did during this period. But other than that, I'm documenting the rest of the story. And like, you have to add that human element to it so people don't think that this is about you. You know what I mean?
So I definitely struggle with that. Of course, we're talking about a memoir in this case, so it's hard to say that I'm not the main character in the book.
Right.
With that said, I would say every author writes themselves into everything that they do. So if you can sort of keep in mind like where you fit in the story, then you can keep it under control. But that's, it's not easy. Definitely not easy.
Yeah. And speaking of things that are not easy, let's talk about getting a mortgage. So one of the things that's difficult for you to do is getting a mortgage. And we have a sponsor here that can help you do that. So if you listen to the show before, you know that we have a sponsor here. His name's Craig Oxane. He is the area sales manager and mortgage broker at the Money Store. He's a class of 1994. He can lend in all 50 states and one of the most successful VA lenders in the country. Craig will give you super competitive rates, and he'll give you the best rate that he possibly can. Friends, the mortgage process is super confusing, and with interest rates moving all over the place, you don't want some clown that is trying to make a buck off of you. So deal with somebody who actually cares, not a call center, not some random big box bank or mindless website. This is actually how the West Point Network functions. Craig is helping us stay in business here at Ask for Football, and we're introducing you to the very man that can get you a better deal on your mortgage. Plus, Craig doesn't charge lender fees for veterans. That's a huge saving of about $1,300. Get that money, friends. And if you don't want it, cut me the check, and I will gladly spend that $1,300 for you. Craig Oxane, area sales manager at the Money Store. Check him out. He's got a little business card on our website, and that's it. So let's talk about the writing process really quickly, and then we'll move on to trying to get this doggone thing published. So the writing process, I think you guys probably had different styles of writing. I know, Joe, I was involved in that process a little bit because I know you did a lot of interviews, but like, what was the basis when you really like moved into the interviews? I know I gave you a lot of the digital documentation that I had from the deployment, but like, I think what really made your story the most human wasn't the fact that you had like all the dates and everything racked and stacked correctly. It was the fact that you actually talked to people to develop the narrative.
I spent probably 1,000 hours interviewing people. Like, I mean, and people don't understand how intensive the research process was. And the interview part is part of that research process, is that because people remember stuff differently. You remember stuff differently. And it's hard to like piece all of that stuff together. So I went like chapter by chapter, month by month, just piecing together these different stories, interviewing people, re-interviewing people, interviewing people, re-interviewing people, matching up with what the reporting says, and making sure that the memory side, because I didn't want to just put something out there and then people are like, oh, that we didn't do that. Okay, cool. That's why everything in there, I mean, it's authentic because it's accurate. It's as accurate as I could possibly get it. And that's because the guys shared so much. And it was funny because at first nobody wanted to talk to me. It was like Rob and a couple of people were like, Joe's writing a book. Cool. And then once I started putting out and sharing people the stories, they were like, wow, this is really good. Maybe I should you know, you need to know this story. You need to know this story.
Good
And
for
about
you,
a month
man.
before I actually published a book, I had to change probably like 4 or 5 different chapters because so much information came that I was like, wow, that's awesome. So yeah.
Danno, how about you? What was your writing process look like? Because you said 80,000 words came out. Like, was that in one sitting or was that like over time? Because, you know, 80,000 words is not a simple feat. So how did you like work through that process in writing your story?
So I work very differently than that. I don't know if I would recommend my process to other people, but I usually will write. I just sit down and have an idea and I'll just write. Um, 10,000 words is like a start. Usually I don't have a sense of what I'm into until I'm like 30,000 words into it over the course of a few weeks. And just to try to get a sense of like what we're even talking about, and then go back and try to impose order on chaos. So again, I don't know if I would recommend that to other people, but at this point in my life, I very rarely use an outline. I just throw it down. And then it's like, I get to a certain point. It's like, okay, what do I have? And what is this? What actually is this? And with this, it was just like everything I could think of. Like, why did you make all these crazy decisions? Why are we doing this? And it was totally emotional. And the first draft was way too emotional. I mean, it was just like vomit on the page. And I worked with my friend Elizabeth a little bit, who is, a professional editor and stuff. And she was like, listen, you got to step back and just tell us what happened, take the emotion out and just tell us what happened. And it'll read better. But that was rewriting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. But I think rewriting is part of the process. And
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things is like, as an author, like, look, I think there's probably a couple of things that you're not going to be a first time go at, and writing is probably one of them, because like, particularly if you want to get published, right? Because there's always going to be somebody that's going to have notes or somebody that's going to say, hey, it would work better if you change this, or it would flow better in the story with X, Y, or Z. But, once you found your voice, was there a difficult part in writing the book? And I'll ask that question from both of you guys, because I know, Dan, yours is a very personal story, and Joe, I know, probably the hardest part for you, but to the audience, could you just articulate, was there a difficult time where you got to the point where you were just stuck, or you had something like seriously emotional that you had to overcome to make the story make sense?
So for me, I wrote the actual book in about 4 months. I waited. There was one particular chapter in the book. In the book, the chapter is called Heartbreak and Heroes. It's the story of December 8th of 2003 when we lost Bridges and Wesley and Blickenstaff. And it was the last chapter of the book that I wrote. And it was, I honestly didn't know if I was going to be able to get through it. Like, I stopped and started, stopped and started, stopped and started so many times. Because it was a crossroads. It's a crossroad chapter in the book, because not only do you have the emotion of losing those guys and all of the stuff that happened to go along with it, but it also, in some ways, it is the story of the Legend of Blackhawk Company 123 Infantry, because that was our transformation. That incident that happened could have broken, and probably should have broken us. Like, we probably should have been pulling guard duty for the rest of the time. But just the resolve that everybody showed and the leadership that we had from you and Swifty, and it just manifested itself into something different, where we stood up collectively and said, this is never going to happen again. And that is such a huge part of what makes the Legend of Blackhawk Company 123. But it was so hard to put that into words, because I wanted to do that one. I mean, if everything else is wrong in the book, damn it, at least this chapter is going to be right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know how to follow that up.
Should let you go first, Dan. My bad.
No, it's all right. It's all right. But my story is just not, I mean, it's just not that, right? I didn't have any problems with this particular story as I was getting it down on paper. Like, I was just emotionally tied into it. And I don't know, I got in a zone. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I write every day, and when I get in a zone, I can put out 1,000 words in an hour, and you'll read them and be like, oh, that's not bad. And I was kind of in that space for, like I said, 3 months, just vomiting all of this out. Where I struggled with it was trying to make sense of it after the fact, to figure out how to, like I said, how to pull myself out of it, how to make it something that other people would read. And, there's such a thing as scene structure and story structure. And there's a reason why things work in fiction or even in memoir, and trying to figure out, where the emotional breaks are, and how to build in that structure around actual events was probably the most technically challenging thing. But it wasn't like what Joe's talking about. That's just, this is just like a technical writing, like, problem per se.
Yeah. But either way, both of those are challenges that could lead you to like stop writing. Right. And I think that's
Absolutely.
That's the real part, is overcoming, those aspects of whatever part of your story that's difficult, whether it be a very emotionally weighted thing, or trying to make sense of, stream of consciousness. And that's one of the things that I've always had to work on with my writing, is because, like, if you ask me to write about something, I can write about it.
Yeah.
I can give you 2,000-3,000 words, but it's going to be like, were you drunk when you wrote this? Were you half asleep? Because it's just stream of consciousness. It's just popping off the top of my head. And I'm just trying to, capture what I'm feeling in the moment. And sometimes what you're feeling in the moment is completely unstructured, and it shows in the writing.
Yeah.
And so I think
sure.
that's part of the balance, is really being able to do this.
Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I was
so the one thing that I found really challenging to describe, and it's not even that emotional, is just what it's like to go to swim practice every single day and swim for 2.5 hours, like, mentally and emotionally, to be in the pool with your head going back and forth for that amount of time. I mean, when I think about my swimming career, it's like remembering that time I had a mental illness. It was just my whole life. I say that with all love. Like, I still swim 4 times a week. I love the sport, but I physically cannot be that dedicated to anything ever again, or it will ruin my marriage. Right. Yeah. And I like, this is the difference between me and my father. Like, he couldn't let it go, and I had to learn to.
Yeah.
So but I wouldn't say it's emotional. Like, how do you write about swimming? But how do you get across the idea of, like, going to swim practice at 5 a.m. in the morning, and then again in the afternoon, from the time you're 14 until you're 22? Like, just how do you get that across? Like, what does that look like in the mind of somebody who has never done anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's like, you try and make everything as relatable as you can to a common experience. It's kind of like jumping out of an airplane or getting into your first gunfight or whatever, right? Like I can tell you everything technically about it. I can show you a video. You can watch it on YouTube and everything else. But until I step out of that door and that wind hits my face and I get that opening shock, I don't know what it feels like to be a paratrooper. I just don't, right? I can be as descriptive as I can with the language, and, like, I can bring you as close as I can to it, but I can't throw you out of the aircraft. And I think that's one of the things that, like, is very, very good writers do that. They immerse you in the writing, and then you're like, oh, wow, this is like a tour de force. I'm feeling this. I get it. But then, I want to feel like I'm in the situation, but I don't want to be in it. Right. Like, that's really, I want to be immersive. I want to be immersed, but not immersive, is probably the easiest way to say it. So when it came time for publishing, what did you think? We'll go Danno first and then Joe. Publishing, how was that process for you? Because, I mean, there's lots of ways to publish a book. Like, there's tons of ways to publish a book, but, some are easier or more difficult than others. So we'll go Danno and then Joe.
So I've been back and forth about this quite a bit. I've never been a joiner, and I'd rather start a small business than have somebody tell me how to do something I know how to do, which is probably to my detriment as a writer. So, and especially with this story, like, I'm not under the impression that it's ever going to be a bestseller. Like, I'm a West Pointer, but I didn't go to war. I'm a swimmer, but I didn't go to the Olympics. But okay, so why do I care about this? Answer is, maybe you don't. I don't know what to tell you. Either you're into a sports narrative about finding yourself through sports, or you aren't.
Yeah.
And writing a West Point book that's about West Point sports is definitely, that's like not, and swimming, not even football, is, people are like, what? But people really liked the book, and, like, several of my classmates, like, really liked it. So anyway, so it was more like, I wrote the thing, showed it to my kids, and then it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this? Am I just going to leave it? Is this the end? So I was talking to my friend, as I said, Elizabeth, and I decided to just try to fix it as best I could and put it up on my blog for whoever cared. And that was fine. And it was like, it probably was like that for years. I mean, it took me half a year just to get it out there in that form.
Hmm.
And then, but the problem is all the West Pointers wanted to read the West Point shit, and then they didn't care about the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, God damn it, you guys are supposed to read the whole fucking book, right?
Yeah.
So I rewrote it again, and I just put it out there. And again, you know, for whoever cares. But yeah, there's just no universe in which some publisher is going to be like, oh, that's shit, let's put that out there. I'll bet that'll be on the New York Times bestseller list. Like, as a business, it isn't. It's a story. It's my story.
Joe, how about you?
Well, I had this crazy experience where I couldn't get my foot in the door to find a publisher that would even read my story, let alone decide if it was good or not, because name recognition, knowing people, like there was just every door in the world was closed.
It's such a game. Like it really is. It's an
impossible.
Industry like any other industry.
It's impossible to get your foot in the door. Even if you have the greatest story ever, it's still impossible. So rather than go down the charlatan, pay for publishing, all those routes where they promise you the world and you pay them to do it, I was like, dude, I'm not doing that. So originally I published on Amazon, and it was going to be for the guys in Blackhawk Company. So I never paid to have it edited because, you know what? It's just for them. Like I said before, something they can give to their kids. And then like this really crazy thing happened where people liked it even unedited. Like people were like, wow, this is amazing. This is the realest thing I've ever read in my life about combat. Like, and it wasn't even edited. So I was like, wow. So I went back and I had it professionally edited. And it is so much better. It's ridiculous. Like, it's good. It's really good now. But like the story itself, and still, even with good reviews and people talking good about it, like in the veteran community, it's a well-respected document. Like Danno said, though, everywhere else, like nobody knows who the heck this dude is. But it opened up other avenues where I was able to get into, like, shoot an episode of Combat Story and shoot in episodes of The Beaten Zone where other people had read it and they were like, man, we got to get this story on here and talk about it. And from that perspective, it was amazing. I still don't have a publisher. I'm working on my second book right now. And let me tell you, the first book is an amazing story, but I was not a great writer. This book, I am 10 times the writer that I was when I wrote Gods of War. So this next book, I did a year and a half of research straight before I even started to write. And now I'm in the writing and interviewing process right now. So I can't even imagine. I mean, this book's going to be like 700 pages. It's so huge. So I'm in the process of shopping for a publisher right now. And I have a PR lady and marketing stuff who's working with me now to try to do something to break down those barriers, because I think if I could get my foot in the door and just show them the stories, that the stories speak for themselves. It's just breaking down that gateway.
Yeah. So got one last question before we wrap the show. And the question is advice to writers. We'll go with Joe and then we'll give it to Dan. What would you tell somebody that, like, they're sitting there and like, hey, I've got this really good idea for a story or a book, or even if it's just an article, like, hey, I want to write an article and become a freelance reporter for, as for soccer, since we have the World Cup recently. But, just thinking about like, hey, I have a voice, I have a niche, I want to be able to put out some information on it. What advice would you give those guys if they're just starting out?
Everybody's a writer and is going to write a book until it's time to write a book. I mean, but I would say, don't get me wrong. I mean, everyone says they're going to write a book and everyone has a story, and a lot of people do. But the problem is that they just don't start. Like, starting, once you, like Danno said, when you start writing and you just start pumping stuff out, it's amazing what happens. The wheels in your head, like, you just forget everything else and you just go, 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 go. At least that's how it was for me. Like, just start it. Like, writing is so therapeutic for me. I love writing. I write something every single day. I mean, even in my head when I'm driving around, I'm writing. I'm building a story. I have all these other stories that I'm going to write down the road already outlined and ready to go. And it's therapeutic for me and it keeps my mind going, but you have to start. You have to firmly sit down in front of your computer and decide what you want to write about and write. That would be my best advice. That's the only way to get started.
Cool. Danno, how about you?
I mean, I agree completely. Omar and I were talking about this. You know, I don't know if he's still out at NTC, but he's been out at NTC the last couple of weeks. And, you know, he said, all this crazy shit has happened and I want to write about it. And I was like, well, if you don't write about it, Omar, I promise you nobody else is going to.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to tell your story, like, you have to tell it. Is nobody's going to be like, hey, let me tell your story for you. Like, you know, you're not Mick Jagger. So
Yeah. For sure.
And especially for other West Pointers. I mean, this is true, I'm sure, for all vets, but you know, U.S. Grant wrote probably the best memoir in the English language. His memoirs of the Civil War, very much the way you did, Joe, by going through his old orders and his dispatches and just doing the research on his own shit to get all technically correct. And so as West Pointers, like, that's the bar, right? He wrote the best memoir. So I feel like it's part of the West Point experience to just see how you're going to measure up to that. Like, I just think that's a thing that's one of those challenges that the legends threw out there for you.
Jeez, Dan, that's a pretty stiff challenge. Like, now I got to sit down and write a book. No, thank you. You know,
no, not a book, a memoir,
a personal memoir. Yeah.
Why are you here? Why did you do this shit that you did? And then after you write it, you can decide if it's just going in a drawer. I don't care, but you know,
and don't die right after it's done.
That's a fair point too, and leave it to somebody in your family to capitalize on rather than you taking advantage of it if the story is that good. But speaking of one last story, we got one last plug to go. And speaking of stories, this one's a great one. So there's a reason why you don't need another workout. You need a coach who's an expert in fitness and proven protocols, but more importantly, someone who's survived total physical and mental collapse himself. And by pulling themselves out of the fire and rebuilding themselves stronger and better than ever. Greg Anicelli is a class of 97 graduate, a U.S. Army veteran, a successful enterprise software sales executive, an IFBB pro bodybuilder, NCI certified coach, and now is the founder of Warriors Physique Fitness. After losing everything, his marriage, his identity, his confidence, his physical and mental health, Greg rebuilt himself from rock bottom through faith, discipline, and elite level training. At 50 years old, he recently became the overall classic physique bodybuilding champion at the NPC Masters at the U.S. National Championships in Las Vegas. He earned his pro card, proving that it's never too late to be the warrior that you were meant to. Today's Greg's mission is to coach men and women who are struggling and drifting in decline, resurrects themselves physically, mentally, and spiritually with his online coaching program. If you are ready to reclaim your strength, your confidence, and warrior ethos, apply now to warriorsphysiquefitness.com. Start writing your own comeback story. And as a special note, Greg is offering active duty military veterans and first responders 15% off their first 16-week transformation fee. AFF members and First Club members and West Point grads get 30% off the same initial 16 weeks free. Like all of our sponsors, Greg has a business card on our website. It's like a Spartan helmet. Just click on it, fill out the paperwork. You'll be talking to Greg in no time. And if you're the good fit, you'll be on there. Hey, this has been great. You know, it's not our standard fare. For those of you that thought we were going to be talking, you know, X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's on this, but I think this is it's an important thing is like capturing your history, man. Like, and we were talking about it in the pre-show, you know, you can do tons with social media and cameras and photos and all that other stuff, but like sometimes the narrative is just as important. And, you know, two guys have done it right here. And you know, the exceptional part of it is the fact that they published, right? Like most people write, but not a lot of people get published. So we thank you guys for your efforts in putting that out there for, you know, the rest of the world to see. If you don't mind, guys, give us the name of your books and then we'll wrap the show.
My book is called Gods of War, The Legend of Blackhawk Company 1, 2, 3 Infantry. My second book, which will be out in May, is called Thunder in Mosul, Blood and Steel in the City of Insurgents. It's about my second deployment to Mosul.
Wow.
Which is just unbelievable because and the second book is probably in a more tumultuous time. So there's probably a lot more interesting.
Well, it's interesting because the Stryker Brigade during the surge was sent down to Baghdad to root out all the insurgents, and all those insurgents left and went to Mosul right at the time when I showed up.
Oof.
Yeah.
So my job was to hunt insurgents. I was the targeting NCO running a SIGINT a SIGINT mission, and that's what I did for 15 months was hunt insurgents.
Sounds outstanding. Danno, how about you?
Again, how do you follow that? My book has the worst title in the world. Swim, Bike, Run, Live, Love, Repeat. It's about becoming, being a swimmer, becoming a triathlete, and becoming the person who can survive, sort of the death of your entire family, which is what happens. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Dan, don't sell yourself short. I think your story is just as important.
Exactly.
No. I listen, I am the last person to sell myself short. But I'm not going to, it's my own personal experiences with something that everybody's going to go through, which is losing your parents. I'm not saying it's not an important thing, but it isn't, your second deployment to Mosul. It's kind of a universal thing, not a unique time in American history, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well, and that's fair. So for the crew here at As for Football, As for Lifestyle, we're going to try and continue to do this. So like, if you like these shows, please comment and let us know, because we will continue to come up with topics and try and, explore other avenues in the off season. We are not going to do them during football season, so you can pound sand on that, but we will do them in the off season if there's interest for us to continue this. I'm your host, Rob, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Blackhawk 6 former. We got Joe Troutman calling to you out of the great state of Maryland, and Danno Ikebesa calling to you out of coastal Connecticut. And one quick plug, hey, camp is open. Camp is open, at West Point right now. And
our next show is liable to be about football.
Yeah, and there's a lot of camps that are starting on or about the 1st. The 1st of August is on a Saturday, but camp will be starting in the early part of August, and so you're gonna have youth football starting. You're gonna have pro football starting. You're gonna have football. We're about 40 days out, and then we'll be in full swing. But again, for the crew here, we thank you guys for coming on, checking us out, and we will see you guys next time. And as always, beat Navy.
Beat 'em.
Thanks for listening to this week's Ask for Football Army Football Show. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Army football. Remember, whether you're cheering in the stands or following along from home, get all your updates on the Army football team at AskForFootball.com. And as a special thanks, we would like to thank our sponsor, Jocelyn Bradley Real Estate. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, Jocelyn Bradley is the expert you need. Visit JocelynBradley.com for all your real estate needs. Don't forget, subscribe, leave us a review, and follow us on social media for all the latest updates. Until next time, go Army, beat Navy.